Hi, everybody. Happy Friday. Thanks for joining me today in the Locher Room on April 1st, 2022, on the second anniversary of the Locher Room. 2 years ago on this Friday in April, I launched the Locher Room with Martha Byrne, Don Hastings, Kelly Menahan, Michael Park, and Maura West from As the World Turns as my first guests. Today, 2 years later, Patricia Bruder Debrovner, who played Ellen Lowell Stewart, is here today to help me celebrate and take a look back at her career in show business and her 30 years on your favorite daytime drama, As the World Turns. As all of you know, As the World Turns would have turned 66 tomorrow on April 2nd. Patricia has been married to her childhood sweetheart, Chuck Debrovner, for 63 years. They have two daughters, Caroline and Diane, and two granddaughters, Allison and Jane. Patricia and Chuck have been active members of the New York Society for Ethical Culture for many years. Since 2005, she has been producing their Ethics in Theater program, a monthly play reading series that's followed by an audience discussion of the ethical issues in each play. As producer, she is involved in every aspect of the program, choosing the plays, the directors, casting, preparing the scripts, the flyers, and programs, and arranging the rehearsals. But the best part is that she has gotten to play a host of delicious roles. It is my distinct pleasure to welcome to the Locher Room, Patricia Bruder Debrovner.
Alan.
Hi, Patricia.
Actually, I was on the show for 35 years.
35 years.
From 1960 to 1995.
That's my apologies for that little.
and when our older granddaughter watches this, she's going to want me to let you know that her name is Abigail, not Allison. Her name is Abigail Rose, but we call her Abby.
Oh, I am so sorry.
That's okay.
Oh, did I say Allison? I have it written down. My apologies.
No
my
problem.
apologies.
No problem.
But I'm glad you corrected me because if she's going to watch this, I want to make sure of that.
I definitely told everyone so much about me already. What's left to tell?
They are so excited to see you. They are over the moon. And I read you something earlier, but I'll read it out loud for everybody. Patricia is the reason I became hooked on soaps. When her character of Ellen killed Franny, the story was so compelling, it hooked me, and I watched As the World Turns until the end. I
didn't mean to kill her. It was about to tell my son that I was his real mother, and the judge had made me promise that I would never interfere or do anything like that. I just picked up the nearest lamp or something and threw it. I was a good throw.
I love that. Well, first of all, I really thank you so much for being here. For me, it's such a pleasure. I grew up watching As the World Turns before I started working on the show. And one of our fans, Marcus Jones, reached out to me and he helped me find you through your daughter on Twitter, which was amazing. So I appreciate you being here today.
I'm so glad to be here, and it's a special day.
It is. It really, really is. So you grew up in Brooklyn. What was your childhood like in Brooklyn?
Oh, it was a happy, lovely childhood in a quiet neighborhood, Flatbush, tree-lined street. I had wonderful, devoted parents. They took such good care of us, and they were a terrific team. They had unbounding energy. My mother would cook such delicious meals for us. And, my father came to the United States from Hungary when he was 19 years old. And he had some distant cousins. He got a job with one of his cousins, and he gradually worked his way up from the button department to being a wholesale salesman. My mother's parents had come from Europe, from Poland, and started in the Lower East Side, looked for greener pastures, then went up to Worcester, Mass, where they had a relative, and he was still looking for greener pastures, and they ended up going to Des Moines, Iowa. My mother was born and brought up in Des Moines, Iowa, one of 7 children.
Wow.
And her older sister, Belle, ended up in New York City. She was married to a friend of my father's. And one time when Belle and her husband went back to Des Moines to visit the family, they brought my father along. Very handsome, greatest person you could meet. And he and my mother fell in love. Before you know it, she was visiting New York and they were engaged to be married within weeks.
Wow.
Yeah.
Have you ever lived anywhere else but New York City?
Nope. Chuck lived right around the corner from me. And we lived in Brooklyn until we got married. And we've been in Manhattan ever since. In fact, we've been in the same apartment since 1963.
Oh my God, that's amazing. Tell me what you love about New York City.
Oh, there's so much to love about it. I so appreciate the theater, the museums, concerts. The streets are so alive with people, and there's such a nice diversity of people. So many interesting, different neighborhoods. You know, anything that you need, it seems you can get in New York City. And the stores are sometimes open 24 hours. The restaurants, all kinds of restaurants during the pandemic. How lucky we were that food could be delivered to us. You know, that doesn't happen in a lot of towns.
Yeah, correct. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, that's amazing. And I said it in the introduction, you have been married to your childhood sweetheart for 63 years.
Lucky me.
That is lucky
me.
both of you. Lucky both of you. That is amazing. Tell us about Chuck.
I so admire Chuck. He has the finest character. He is so loving and supportive and always so helpful to me. I mean, now when I'm using the computer a lot, when I have a technology problem, he will put down anything he's in the midst of doing and calmly, patiently work until the problem is solved. Chuck doesn't sweat the small stuff, and he doesn't hesitate to take on the big stuff. He's so intelligent, so responsible. He takes on every challenge with determination. You know, he went to, as I eventually did too, to this public high school in Brooklyn. And he was such an excellent student. When he graduated, he was accepted to Yale, Harvard, Princeton, and Cornell.
Wow.
And he chose Yale.
Wow.
Yeah.
We all could learn from him, you know, don't sweat the small stuff.
Right. And we met when I was just 14 years old. I mean, we'll talk in a little while about what I was doing before that, but my friend Susan from down the street asked me to go to a party with her. This was just after I had been in a Broadway show, and I had decided I wanted to transfer to the neighborhood high school. I was, doing my work through correspondence with professional children's school, and schoolwork had always been important to me. So just before I transferred, I went to this party, and Chuck had another party that he was supposed to go to, that he wanted to go to, but it was a surprise 15th birthday. And Chuck's friend was supposed to bring the party girl to the party to be surprised, and he got sick. So they asked Chuck to do it, and he said, all right, but I have to go to my party. Once I bring her, I'm going to my other party with my friends. So he came and we met, and I went to the party with him, and we fell in love, and we've been together ever since.
That's amazing. And as Floyd just wrote, he said, what a lovely relationship you have with your husband. We should all be so fortunate.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Well, I admire Chuck.
That's amazing. I love that. And together you have Diane and Caroline. Diane also went to Yale, and Caroline Vassar. Tell us about, they didn't follow in either of your footsteps, right?
Right. Well, now, both of them were really very good in school productions.
Oh, okay.
And Diane actually was in a play at Yale. But when it came time to choose a career, you know, show business, you can be so talented and really not have a steady job and income. And when she graduated from Yale, she decided to go into journalism. And she has been the deputy editor of Parents Magazine for so many years. She's been with Parents for 26 years.
Wow.
Until just this past month when the magazine decided to fold.
Oh no, I didn't hear that.
And also Diane is a very talented writer, and she's written books for preteens.
That's great.
She has maintained a close friendship with her favorite Yale classmates. And she's happily married to Daniel Minus, who I had the pleasure of marrying.
Oh, I know, you told me. I was going to talk about that a little later, but that's great.
Yeah.
I mean, that must have been such an incredible experience.
Yes, just a thrill. And so Diane, I'm trying to think if I told you everything that I wanted to tell you about. I think that she majored in women's studies at Yale. Now, Caroline, when she went to Vassar, she developed a passion for sociology, and she went on to teach sociology at the college level, first at Pace University and now at St. Joseph's, and she enjoys it so much. At the end of every semester, she kind of misses the students that she has taught.
Well, and I bet, they miss her as well. Teachers have such an impact on kids.
Yes.
Such an impact.
And then we have two granddaughters, as you said. So Abigail is our older granddaughter. And she went to school at Ethical Culture Fieldston. And from there, she went to Duke University. And she majored in biomedical engineering.
Wow.
Very, very smart young woman. And when she graduated, she immediately was hired by IBM and has been with them ever since.
Amazing.
And she met her husband at Duke. Both of them were there. He was a couple of years ahead of her. And they were supposed to be married in September of 2020.
Oh.
So they decided that they would put off the real big wedding celebration for the next year. And they did have it this past September. And so what happened was that when they would have originally had the wedding, we just had a ceremony for the immediate family. on a balcony outside with a view of the skyline of Manhattan.
Oh,
And
beautiful.
the tables for dinner were spread far apart for safety. And so they, had a marvelous celebration this September.
That's beautiful. Beautiful.
Yeah.
And you and Chuck have been active members of the New York Society for Ethical Culture since 1985. Tell us about the organization.
Yes, but before I do,
Yes.
let me mention my
Oh,
other
Jane.
granddaughter.
I forgot Jane. Yes.
Yes. Jane is
Look at
now,
you. You're keeping me on track. I love it.
well, Jane is not to be forgotten. Jane is
There you
in
go.
the end of her junior year in high school. She's just starting to visit colleges to look around. Jane has a beautiful singing voice, and she has loved being in musical productions as extracurricular. In fact, she just recently was in Chicago, and now she's in rehearsal for The Drowsy Chaperone, which I never did see, so I'm really looking forward. And she's going to play the role that Sutton Foster played. So
tell everybody who's watching Jane's last name so they keep an eye out when she
Minus.
Jane Minus.
Her father is Daniel Minus. Yes.
We have to keep an ear out for that name.
Yeah. And she's an excellent student also. And she chose Chinese as her foreign language to study.
Good for her. My God, that is not easy, and good for her. I hope.
Right. But I'm sorry, I interrupted you.
No, that's fine.
Been members, very, very active members of the New York Society for Ethical Culture, as you said, since 1985. And it's added immeasurably to my life. Ethical culture it's inspired by the ideal of working to try to make a more just and humane world. It's dedicated to education, building rewarding relationships, environmental stewardship, and I've made such dear friends there, and I have been able to develop other creative avenues. As we mentioned before, I became a wedding officiant, an ethical culture wedding officiant, and I have had the pleasure of marrying about 130 couples. Yeah.
That's got to be so special.
Yeah. And it's been 16 years now that I've been running Ethics and the Theater. It's I think you told everyone, it's a monthly play reading. And it's like one of our most favorite ways of studying ethical behavior and ethical relationships.
I love that.
We have a
Tell us
discussion
about your role as the producer for that program.
Oh my goodness. It's like a full-time job. It really is. First, we have to find the plays. I have a committee and they help me with ideas of plays to do. I read reviews. I buy a copy of the plays or get it at the library. And when we find a play that we want to do, and we're looking for different issues, plays that are about important issues, like women's rights, like gay pride, like protecting our democracy, like the environment, so many, important issues. And we will find a play that embodies the issue. And of course, I have to choose a director, help with the casting. I think you mentioned making posters, making flyers. A lot of technology and computer work goes into it.
Yeah,
And we often have a little reception beforehand, getting some beverages and snacks to offer. And we have to have a sound check. We have to arrange for the rehearsals and the setup for the rehearsal rooms and microphones. It's just really a full-time job, but a very satisfying one.
I was going to say it must be very rewarding. I mean, you're in the the field you love so much, but also talking about issues that matter to all of us.
Right. And the audience have loved the readings. They just enjoy them so much. And, I've gotten to play such delicious roles that I never would have had a chance for, in show business itself. But,
what are some of your favorites?
Well, recently, for the second time, I did the Glass Menagerie. Loved it. And I loved Love Letters, Streetcar Named Desire, Long Day's Journey into Night, Trip to Bountiful, Crossing Delancey, The Gin Game, on Golden Pond. Oh, I could just go on and on. Wonderful plays, just wonderful roles. And I've enjoyed it. The atmosphere at Ethical Culture is so appreciative and supportive that I get to take on these really challenging roles, and I never feel nervous I just feel very comfortable and at home there.
That makes it a great experience when you're comfortable and you feel at home.
Yeah.
What were some of the other roles you've played on and off Broadway?
Well, the very first theater role that I played, I was around 12 years old. I had started to take private acting lessons, and my teacher, Edith Becton, would write monologues.
First of all, sorry to interrupt. I love that you remember her name to give credit to our teachers. I just love it when some because I think it's so important to remember them and to
Absolutely. I couldn't
say it out loud.
Edith Becton she had this apartment on Riverside Drive overlooking the Hudson, and she wrote these wonderful monologues. And the first monologue she taught me was of a British girl during World War II, when they brought the children away from London to be protected. And she went into this BBC office to be able to talk on the radio waves to her parents back in London. And she was very, very composed. And when they called her to speak to her parents, and when she heard their voice, oh, Mommy, Daddy, I'm just fine, but I miss you so much. I want to come home. And then, she would hardly get anything. And then she said, oh, is it all over? Oh, thank you ever so much. And she would go on. So I had this British accent, and Edith Becton told us at one point, they're looking for an understudy for The Innocence, which William Archibald wrote as an adaptation of The Turn of the Screw. And would you like to audition for it, Pat? Patsy. I was Patsy then. And I said, yes. So my mother was so smart. She immediately went and got tickets for the matinee because I had an appointment after that Saturday matinee, when it was over. And we saw this matinee. It was a 4-character play. The role of Flora was enormous and so wonderful. And afterwards, when the curtain went down, I said, I don't know that I could go back. We have an appointment. You need to go backstage. So I went and I sat with the stage manager on one of the steps of this winding staircase. Joe Malzini won the award for the best scenic design that season. And I had just seen the show. So when he gave me the scripts to read, it just flowed so easily. And he said, could you come for a rehearsal next week? I got it right then. And we went outside. My father had driven us over there. And he said, how'd it go? And my mother said, she got it. She got it. She goes into rehearsal next week. Well, sometime during that week, I had a cold and I stayed home from school. And when you're young, your memory is like a sponge. I memorized the whole part that day in bed. Wow. And a few days later, we got a phone call. And they asked me if we could come right away for a special technical rehearsal. And we went, and they taught me all of the blocking, where to go and everything. And the song that I had to play on the harpsichord and sing, oh, bring me a bonnet, oh, bring me a bonnet, oh, bring me a bonnet of bright rosy red, with white ribbons on it, with white ribbons on it, oh, bring me a bonnet to wear on my head. It turned out that this rehearsal was because Iris Mann, who I was understudying, was sick. They said, take Patsy out for dinner and go over the lines with her. We went around the corner. I had a sandwich and some chicken noodle soup and Jell-O, and Mother checked my lines. We came back, and it didn't seem real, but the producer, Peter Cookson, who was married to Beatrice Straight, who was playing the governess, he took me upstairs and put makeup on me. And they brought me Iris Mann's costumes, and they all fit. And they took me out onto the stage, and I sat at the harpsichord, and I heard the sound of this heavy curtain rising. And I started singing, and playing. And the poor audience was probably so disappointed that the understudy was on. But every scene went beautifully. No mistakes. And it was a thrill. And I went on about a dozen times for the rest of the run. And then they asked me to play the role for the national tour. This was like in April through June. And in September, the national tour started. And my wonderful parents were good enough to be willing to be separated for that period of time, which was, about 9 months of the tour. My father stayed home alone, although my grandmother was just down the street, and I'm sure he did a lot of cooking. She did a lot of cooking for him. But my mother, went with me, and she was my dresser. I had these beautiful little costumes and quick costume changes, and she would do that. So anyway,
you're getting a lot of claps, by the way. The
Yes.
fans are saying bravo, masterclass, clap, clap, brava, brava, Patricia from Tony. Lots of for your song there.
Wow. Well, one of the times that I went on as understudy, a Broadway producer, Robert Fryer, was in the audience. And he called us and said he would like me to play Francie when he was going to produce the musical A Tree Grows in Brooklyn with Shirley Booth playing the Anne. And my mother said, well, we just signed a run-of-the-play contract for the tour. And he said, oh, you'll be home in time. And then we went and we're enjoying the tour. And when we got close to New York, like coming to Philadelphia, Bob Fryer asked if we would come and just sing for Arthur Schwartz and read a scene for George Abbott. And so we did. And the little scene that I read, it ended, she was with her father. And I had the best father. And at the end of the scene, she said, my cup runneth over. And the tears were streaming down my face. And so the part was mine, but the tour lasted longer than Bob Fryer had expected. And it ended up, they had to cast someone else. And then the producers of the Innocence closed the tour in time for me to be there in the audience for opening night.
For a tree.
But I don't care. I don't regret it, because the rest of my life would not have happened if I had done it. I never would have met Chuck. I never would have had our family. So it was meant to be.
Everything is meant to be. Well, I want to move on to this dinner with Mom and Dad. You told me that you took a job in the original Gypsy with an unknown named Ethel Merman. And could you tell everybody what happened after one of the matinees when Mom and Dad took you out to dinner?
They took me out for dinner. I mean, this was after Chuck and I were married. We were married in 1959, the year that Gypsy opened on Broadway. And when we walked into the restaurant, a woman who was one of CBS's casting directors saw me and said, oh, Patsy, you've grown up, haven't you? And then not too long afterwards, they called me to audition to replace Wendy Drew, who played Ellen for the first few years. And she was going to get married to a photojournalist and give up her career so she could be with him and travel with him.
Wow.
So they called me to audition, and I read a scene, and it was an emotional scene, and I was emotional. And Erna Phillips was there, and then they called me for a second audition, and then they told me that they wanted me to play the role. Yep.
Amazing.
And good that I went. Good that Mom and Dad took me to dinner that night.
Seriously, again, like, you have to be in the right place.
Yeah.
I mean, could you ever have imagined when you first said yes that you would have been playing a part for 35 years?
Never. Never. Are you kidding? Yeah, there's a theme here. I seem to do things in the long run, don't I?
Yeah.
Married for 63 years, been in the same apartment since 1960.
But you make an impact. You make an impact. I mean, fans are just thrilled to see. Russell says, so wonderful to see her again after all these years. A timeless beauty inside and out.
Oh.
Floyd asked, would you ever consider a role on one of the remaining soaps? I think that would be too difficult going to California because they're not based here anymore.
That's one of the good things about being on As the World Turns, that I was able to combine it with my family life. I mean, both times I was pregnant with Diane and Caroline, I had to hide it from the audience. And we took an apartment so I could just walk to work with my script in hand, memorizing it, But who would ever expect it would be for 35 years?
Seriously. But that's so true. When you were pregnant with Diane and Caroline, you had to hide it. And then when Ellen finally became pregnant, then you had to wear the pregnancy bump.
Right. Now, that's fair. But we did get through the pregnancies without the audience being aware. I would just pick up anything that was nearby and hold it, in front of me, a pillow, a book, a magazine, a cup, a drink, whatever. And then when it got even too difficult for that, well, I helped the wardrobe designer. My mother had these Chanel type jackets, they were ensembles that one of my father's customers made, and they were crocheted along the edges. So what I did was I would wear a black shell underneath, and then I took black thread and I went from one side of the jacket to the other, holding it from opening up. If it opened up, all the secret would be out. And it hid things for a while. When it got too difficult, someone came up with a brilliant idea of taking the couch that was in our living room and turning it around so that next to the cameras was the back of the couch, and all you saw was my shoulders and my head.
Too bad YouTube wasn't around back then. Your daughters, we would have video, of your daughters, on camera, while you were pregnant, working on the show.
Yeah.
The fans loved Ellen and David. What are your memories of working with Henderson Forsyth?
Oh, he was a consummate actor and such a fine person. It was a pleasure to work with him. I had the pleasure of working with such pros. And he and his lovely wife, Dorothea, lived in Tenafly, New Jersey. He would commute back and forth. Rehearsals started at 7 or 7:30 in the morning. And he was also invariably also on a Broadway or off-Broadway show. So, it was amazing what he was able to do, that he would come in so prepared with, I don't know how much sleep he was able to get and have that commute. But it was a pleasure working for him. When Chuck and I celebrated our 25th anniversary, Dodie made a needlepoint that was framed that we have in our bedroom with a heart, and in the middle of it, 25.
That's so beautiful. That's so beautiful. One of our fans, Ant-Man, says, my favorite episode was back in May of 1993 when Ellen spoke at Oakdale Memorial Hospital's ceremony unveiling the David Stewart AIDS wing. When they did that. Yeah.
I wonder if the audience realizes why David had amnesia. It happened because one of the Broadway shows he was in, he played the sheriff in The Best Little Whorehouse in Texas. And then the show went to London and they wanted him to repeat the role. So he was gone for this long stretch of time, and they had to find some explanation for why we didn't see David. So they came up with the idea of him having amnesia. It was not fun when he came back and fell in love with the character played by Linda Dano. I didn't like that.
No, I'm sure you didn't. I am sure you didn't. That is so funny. That is funny. Well, today, April 1st, happens to be Don Hastings' birthday, Dr. Bob.
Oh, happy birthday, Don.
Those early days, it was you and Eileen Fulton and Don Hastings and Kathy Hayes. What do you remember?
They all, as I said, were such responsible pros. I mean, you hear tell about how actors are dependent on the teleprompters. Everyone came in with their lines memorized, and I admired that these other cast members not only knew their lines, they knew where the blocking, where they had to be, and they even were aware of where the camera was so that they could position themselves and be seen properly from the camera. It really was terrific.
And you were live in those early days.
Yes. Until 1975, we were a half an hour live. Once it went to an hour, we went on to tape. It was really more fun earlier because everything was done in sequence, like in the theater. Once we had to do it for an hour, they would do all the scenes in one set, then all the scenes in another set, and one thing didn't follow the other. I'm trying to think what I was about to say. Well, you were asking me about all these other wonderful cast members.
Eileen and Don and
Eileen, when Chuck and I gave a 25th anniversary party at Sardi's, Eileen came over to me and said, Patsy, I was speaking with Van Cliburn, and he was asking me if it might be possible for him to come with me to the party. And I said, of course. So she brought Van Cliburn to the party. And Kathy Hayes has a wonderful daughter, Sherry. And Diane and Caroline loved when Sherry would come and babysit for them.
I love that Sherry babysat for them.
Yeah.
See, it's all in the Oakdale family.
Yep. They would watch the show.
Did your girls watch?
They did.
I love that. I love that. Did you have a favorite friend who was on the show with you?
Yes. I don't remember the storyline, but our good friend Judy Blazer played Ariel. I think was she related in some way?
The fans might tell us momentarily, Patricia. I'll let you know. They may know.
But Judy Blazer became such a good friend of ours. And she and I did 2 musical benefits at Ethical Culture. Oh, she was so talented. You didn't see on the show what a wonderful musical performer she was. Oh, I loved seeing her playing My Fair Lady, the lead, and Peter Pan. We went up to Buffalo near Niagara Falls to see her doing Peter Pan, and it was sure worth the trip. And
the fans said Ariel was married to John Dixon, to Larry Brigman.
Oh, well, Larry, speaking of these wonderful members of the cast, Larry Brigman and Margaret Colin have done so many fine theater plays that we've enjoyed.
Margaret just went to see, possibly last night or the night before, she went to see Hugh Jackman in The Music Man with her husband, Justin Dees, for his birthday.
Oh, how nice.
But you're right. But so many of the As the World Turns, yourself and Margaret and Larry, are all theater people.
Yeah. I mean, we were so lucky to be on As the World Turns, but there's something so special about being in the theater and getting, an extended rehearsal, not like at the Innocence, not like the 2 rehearsals I had before I went on. Judy Blazer now lives in England. She married a dear friend that she'd grown up with in Montclair, New Jersey. And she's in England, and I miss her.
I bet. Well, technology, you get to see people a little more than before the capability of this type of, possibility.
Do people in England see your show?
They can, yes.
Really?
Yep, they can take, just click on that link I sent you for sure.
For YouTube. Good.
Yeah, for YouTube. Exactly. We were talking about Gypsy. Any memories of Ethel Merman at that time? I mean, you were young, right? When you...
Yes, yeah. I was in my very early 20s. She had such boundless energy and self-confidence. And, we were in this scene with her that started Act 2, and, she would just come out there. I was so glad when I left the show to go and actually see it from the audience. Oh, what a thrill.
One of our fans, King Minos, says it didn't Erna Phillips dislike the cast moonlighting in theater. I think she didn't like people. She didn't like people being out of their As the World Turns character, from what I've heard.
Oh, really? I didn't know that.
Yeah, from what I've heard.
Yeah.
Tammy says, Pat, you look beautiful as always. I enjoyed watching As the World Turns.
Thank you. I had one fan who was so good to me. She started out making me these, small embroidered, beautiful little round doilies that you could put under something. And they kept growing and growing. At one point, she made like a king-size bedspread for me, all with this tiny little embroidery, and then the flounce for the bottom of the bed. Her name was Lena Woodward. And when Chuck and I were out in California one time, we looked her up and visited her because we were so appreciative of all she had given to me.
They are dedicated. I mean, Ellen left in 1990 what?
95.
95, and yep. Look at everybody here today, because they've missed Ellen. You and I talked a little backstage. How difficult was it when they stopped writing for Ellen?
How difficult for me?
Yes, for you as.
Well, there were 2 times that they wrote me out. The first time was not long after I started. In 1961, they were going to make my son Dan older. And they thought I looked too young to be the mother of a child that age that he was going to become. And they recast it. And I did a musical called The Sap of Life at 1 Sheridan Square in Greenwich Village. Maltby and Shire wrote the musical, and I played the ingenue. I realize now that you asked me a while ago to tell you about the other theater I've done, and I never got past the Innocence. Well, when I finished that tour, and I missed doing Tree Girls in Brooklyn, I did a play the next fall. Herman Shumlin produced and directed, and he had 7 plays that season. Can you imagine?
Wow.
And I did one called Lace on Her Petticoat. Neva Patterson and Jeff Morrow played my parents, and I was a Scotch girl, and I had to come early to rehearsals to learn how I could have a Scotch accent. My name is Elspeth McNairn. I don't think that was a tough one.
Do you have any difficulty? Is there an accent you have difficulty with? Because you have proven you are quite
well. I luckily another monologue Edith Becton wrote was a Southern dialect, and I did 2 musicals. One was called The King and the Duke at Circle in the Square when it was down in Sheridan Square. Jose Quintero directed it. And I played, I think it was, the character was Mary Jane. And of course, it was a Huckleberry Finn story. So the Southern accent helped. And then I did a musical at the Phoenix Theater called Living the Life when I played Becky Thatcher. And that was a Southern accent. And so, as I said, they wrote me out. And in 1961, I did this fun musical, The Sap of Life. And I was wearing contact lenses then. And during one of the performances, it fell out.
Oh, no.
And after the performance, we were on our knees all over looking for my contact lens. But the other time that they wrote me out of As the World Turns was in 1975. They ran out of story. And then I did 2 productions of the 2-character musical, I Do, by Schmidt and Jones. You know, Eileen had done The Fantastics, one of their other musicals. And I did it first in Mansfield, Pennsylvania, and then at a dinner theater in Elmsford in Westchester. And this director was so great. She was so funny. She had me laughing throughout rehearsals. I had the best time, and it went beautifully. And afterwards, I said to her, Roseanne, you know, she had her own theater near Boston. I said, New York needs to see your work. If you tell me a play that you want to do, I'm going to somehow or other produce it. And she chose The Miracle Worker. I don't know how, but somehow or other, with no experience, I produced that production. It got a terrific review in the trade paper, Show Business, saying that they shouldn't let it just close. They should find another theater to extend the life of the show. We cast it. The actors playing Annie Sullivan and Helen Keller were marvelous. And I found a place for them to rehearse. I found a lovely theater to do it. It was the theater at St. Clement's, which still on West 46th Street, it still has productions there.
Yeah.
To raise money, I started making a long list of friends and all these doctors that Chuck knew, and I would write them and say, you know, if you will contribute so much money, you'll get a ticket, a free ticket to come to see the show. And if you give this money, you'll get 2 tickets. And we raised the money, and everything just went beautifully. You know, Roseanne convinced me to play Kate Keller, Helen's mother. It was a bit much. I mean, to do this producing for the first time, plus playing one of the roles. And Diane and Caroline were in it, because there's this school for the blind that Helen Keller went to. And so Diane and Caroline played blind children. And at one time, there was a young little actress who got sick, and Caroline went on for her. She had never rehearsed it or anything, but you know, these young people, she just knew it by heart anyway and went on and did great.
Love that.
So let
Love
me think
that.
of what else.
Well, I wanted you, because tell us the advice that Helen Wagner shared with you, please.
Helen Wagner said, now, if you don't want to have wrinkles on your forehead, just practice relaxing your face. And in fact, one way to be sure you learn is put some tape on your forehead. And anytime you wrinkle it up, you'll be aware of it and you'll stop. I don't think I ever had to put the tape on, but I just learned to relax my face. And I thank her for it, because it's true. I didn't get, wrinkles on my forehead. And, she told me, when I asked her what kind of exercise she did, I clean my own house. I don't have a housekeeper. I clean my house, and that's all the exercise I need.
I would certainly believe that from Helen.
Yep.
Certainly believe that from Helen. I wanted to read you. Michael says, Patricia, you are a blessing, and I love hearing about your work in musicals. I am an actor doing them myself in Iowa. You were
Iowa?
Yes.
My mother was born and grew up in Des Moines. And you know what else? Henderson Forsyth had 2 sons, and his older son taught, maybe was the head of the drama department in the University of Iowa.
Oh, that's incredible.
I look it up and see if he might still be there.
Wow. And he says, you were such a joy on As the World Turns. I enjoyed so much of your bond with Marie Masters, Kelly Menahan, and Melanie Smith, who played Emily. And Kelly Menahan told me to send you her love. She was sending love your way.
I send it back. I send it back, Kelly.
I could talk to you for hours, Patricia. It is such a delight to meet you. The fans have loved every second of it. They can't believe your memory today.
Selective memory.
Nah, pretty darn good there. I mean, you've had such a career, and I mean, 35 years on one show.
Mm-hmm.
Amazing.
I started on radio when I was 9.
9. How did that happen?
Well, when I went to sleepaway camp, they cast me as Alice in the production of Alice in Wonderland. And I had this wonderful time. And one of the mothers after the performance said to my mother, if she was my daughter, I would do something with her. So when we got home, my mother was an avaricious reader, and she noticed in Nick Kenny's article in the newspaper, he said that they were auditioning children to sing in the chorus of a radio show on WOR called Rainbow House. And my mother said, would you like to go? And I said, yes. So she said, what would you like to sing? And I picked a song from that I'd heard on the hit parade on the radio. And I went, and when I went there, I didn't have any music with me. We went to WOR, which was just a block away from my father's office, and everyone else had music. And I went in to the music director, William Wordes, and he said, where's your music? And I said, I don't have any. And he said, oh, well, what are you going to sing? And I said, well, I can't begin to tell you. It was not an appropriate song for a 9-year-old, but, and he said, what key? I think I'd like to start with I, and so he played it, and he said, can you sight read? I said, what's that? And he said, well, you know, that you can look at the music and know what it says and the rhythm and everything. Well, I took piano lessons, and I find it very easy to learn a tune if I hear it. So he let me join the chorus, and before you know it, they had me doing solos. And Bob Emery, who was the head at the time of Dumont's television down at John Wanamaker's department store, had me doing different television shows. And eventually that, you know, the mothers would say, this is a good singing teacher, and Edith Becton is a good acting teacher. And that's how I got started when I was.
And the rest, as they say, is history. I wanted to read one more thing, because this is when I think we were talking about the plays that you were producing and acting in at Ethical Culture. Ken said, "Nice to see someone trying to make a difference in such an uncaring world, true to the spirit of As the World Turns, even when the show itself moved on from those ideals."
Oh,
so
thank
you so much for spending. I couldn't think of a better guest for today, Patricia. Thank you so much.
Oh, it was such a pleasure for me. It's so good to get to know you, Ellen.
You too. You too. Please take care. Thank Chuck for getting you on the computer today.
Thank you, Chuck.
You have a wonderful weekend.
You too.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
What a great show, everybody. I hope you enjoyed it. I know I did. Thank you, Patricia Bruder, for spending your Friday afternoon with me and helping to celebrate 2 years of the Locker Room. I would like to say thank you to each one of you viewers who have tuned in, wrote messages, suggested guests, and for truly supporting the Locker Room's journey. I thank you from the bottom of my heart. Today, I launched thelockerroom.com, where you can watch the show live each time it airs, find featured episodes, find the Conversations with Alan series, find links to all the streaming platforms where you can download the audio versions of my shows, and buy some merchandise. There are some baseball hats up there right now if you feel so inclined. Check them out. Let's all wish Don Hastings a happy birthday, and Guiding Lights Brian Buffington a very happy birthday. And please join me on Wednesday, April 6th, when Kate Linder joins me here to celebrate her 40th anniversary as Esther Valentine on The Young and the Restless. Please subscribe to my YouTube channel down below if you haven't. Turn on the notifications for reminders of all upcoming shows so that you never miss an episode. I hope you all have a wonderful weekend. Please stay safe, everybody. Bye-bye.